Yo, 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 it's your boy, Mr. P here, back ready to drop another video about everyone's favorite subject, Fortnite. Alright, so today guys, we're going to continue on from where we left off with our video, and we're going to put in our player. We're also looking at setting up our Animator controller, and then putting our animations that we've already got into that controller. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to clear up our screen a bit. So we don't need these sprites anymore. So we're going to go over to our hierarchy. We're going to select Ken Sprite 0, and then Shift and select Ken Sprite 38. Alright, just to make sure we've got them all selected, and then we're just going to delete them. Alright, what we're going to do now is we're going to create our player. So we're going to right click in our hierarchy and create empty. And then we're going to rename this to player. While we're here, we might as well also tag him to our player. So being our player, we want to be able to see him, so we're going to go to add component, and we're going to add a sprite renderer. So if we just type in the word sprite, it'll come up here. So you can see it sets its default to none. So if we click on the circle beside none here, we're just going to set it to our Ken Sprite 0. If we double click, it will go away. And it's pretty small at the moment, so let's scale him up a little bit. I'm just going to set his X and his Y value to 3. And then I'm going to make it so he's not flying in the middle of the sky, and I'll just drag him down to about here on the ground. Alright, that looks pretty good. So now we actually want to be able to run animations on this, so we need what's called an animator. So if we go to our add components, and then type in anim, it gives you a number of options again. Now we don't want animation, we want animator. Alright, so when you've added your animator, you'll notice here that your controller will be generally set to none. Now we don't have a controller for this yet, so we need to create that. So to create that, you go up to assets, you go create, and then you go down to where it says animator controller. Alright, so we're going to name this our player controller. Alright, and then I'm going to drag that up into my animations folder. Just keep everything together. So what we want to do now is we want to add our animations into our player controller. To do that, you need to double click on the player controller, and that will bring you up into a new window called the Animator. So at the moment, it should, as a default, have your entry and exit, and it will have an any state. So the first thing we want to bring in is going to be our idle, because our idle is going to be our default state. So the first one you bring in, you'll notice that it automatically goes from entry and drags its own line across to idle, and it becomes a default state. So this is the animation that it's always going to play. As long as there's no other value or it's not being told to do anything else, it will just run idle. So I'm going to move our exit because we don't actually want an exit. And then I'm just going to drag in all of our other animations. So our walk, our jump, our crouch, and our Hadouken. Alright, now I just like to lay them out in a bit of a generalized pattern. So I'm going to put them like this. Because I've already got an idea of which ones are going to connect with each other. So what we need to do now is we need to create some transitions. Now what a transition will allow it to do is it will allow it to go from one animation to another animation. However, you only want to create a transition if you want to be able to do from one animation to another. So if you want to be able to go from idle to jump, then they need a transition. To do that, you right click on the idle, you go make transition, and then you drag it across to wherever you want to transit to. Alright, so I'm going to make a transition from my idle to all of my others. Alright, and then I'm also going to make a transition from all my outside animations back to my idle animation, because I always want them to be able to go back to idle. The other thing you need to think about is, do you want to be able to go from a walk to a jump? Meaning, if you're walking across your screen, do you want your character to be able to jump as it's walking, or do you want it to have to stop and then jump? Now, I want it to be able to go from a walk to a jump, so I'm going to put a transition in. and then I'm going to put the transition going back, so if I jump in the air, I don't want to have to stop before I can walk again. Right, and the same thing for my walking to crouch. I want to be able to walk and then suddenly crouch if I have to duck underneath something, and if I'm crouching, I want to be able to just walk without jetting up and going back to idle. Right, the other way you can do it is if you want to be able to jump and crouch. Right, if you jump, do you want to have to wait half a second for it to idle before you can crouch, or do you just want to be able to go jump and then crouch in the air? And same thing, do you want to be able to go from crouch back to jump? Now I do, so I'm going to connect these as well. Now the only ones I'm not going to connect is up to my Hadouken. I'm just going to leave it so that you can only go to Hadouken if you are idled. So now we've got our transitions in, we need something to make it actually interact between these things. Now what that is a parameter. So if you go over here under your animator, you have layers and you have parameters. So if we click on parameters, we currently don't have any. But if you click this little plus here, it'll give you a list of options. So you can have a float, an integer, a boolean, or a trigger. Now I'm going to use an integer. Right, and I'm going to name my integer state. Now I've capitalized it. You're going to have to remember later on whether or not you capitalize this and exactly what you call it. So in order to be able to control what does what, we're going to use our transitions. So if we select one of the transitions, I'm just going to select my crouch back to idle. Right, you can see what direction the arrow is pointing. So over here you'll notice you've got a bunch of settings and you've got some conditions. Now our state is going to become our condition. So if we click the plus here, right, it will come up with the condition is state is greater than 0. Now I don't want to work with greater than, so if I select greater than, you get a list of options. You can have greater than, less than, equals to, or not equal to. So I like using equals for this because we don't have a lot of animations. So I'm going to have the arrows that paint back towards my idle are going to be state equals 0. So I need to select all of the arrows that point back to it. I need to add the condition, and I need to change it to equals. Alright, so I've done those now. So all of the ones that point back towards idle, the state is equal to 0. So now I've got that, let's move up to the next one. So I'm going to do my walk next. So for anything that points towards my walk, I'm going to make it that my state equals 1. So pointing towards walk, state is equal to 1. Same thing for my crouch. And then we're just going to move around and do all of them. So for my jump, I'm going to go up to 2. For crouch, I will make it 3. And then lastly for Hadouken, it will equal 4. So now we've set this up, we can test it. To test it, if we go back to our scene, we select our player, and then we drag our player controller onto the animator. Right. And then we go up and we press play. It should jump to our game tag and he should idle. Now to test the other animations, if we select our animator tab at the top here and we change our state to, let's say, 1, and then go back to game, you'll see that he's doing the walking animation now. So same thing, we can test all our animations. So if we go from 1 to 2, right, he's jumping. We go to 2 to 3, he'll be crouching. If we go to 3 to 4, right, it's going to stay on crouch. The reason for that is we don't have a direct connection from our crouch to our Hadouken. So we need to change that back to 0, which is our idle, and then go up to our 4, which is our Hadouken. Alright, so that's all we're going to cover today, ladies and gents. In the next video, we're going to go over fixing up our animations. So you notice that our jumping, our crouching, and our Hadouken animation are currently looping when we don't want them to. So see you guys in the next video. That's all for today.